More than 50 years ago, under Chief Justice William S. Richardson, the Supreme Court of the State of Hawaii ruled that the public had the right to access all beaches throughout our state. But for decades, there have been challenges, clashes throughout the islands involving access pathways that lead to our beaches. What do you think? Is it time we settle this right of access dispute linked to one of the most historically significant rulings in our history? This live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawai'i start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yunji Denise. Both Hawaii residents and visitors alike have the right of access to our beaches as set forth by the Hawaii Supreme Court's landmark ruling. But for beachgoers, achieving right of entry to some of Hawaii's shorelines can be challenging. In the past, many beachfront owners allowed their neighbors and people they knew to access the beach through their properties. Today, access areas often involve high volumes of strangers who can be disrespectful, leaving trash and making noise into the late hours. Now, beachfront owners often prefer keeping the public at a distance from their expensive properties by erecting walls and gates and keep out signs. Beachgoers maintain their right of way to get to the ocean, but may find access areas chained off or in disrepair. So how do we reconcile the efforts of homeowners to keep their properties safe with the public's right of access to the ocean for the enjoyment of all? Tonight, we have legal experts and community activists who will address the often complex and gray areas of contention that arise from beach access disputes. We look forward to your participation. You can email, call, or tweet us your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and our PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guest. David Kimo Frankel is an environmental attorney. He formerly worked at the Sierra Club and Legal Aid Society of Hawaii and the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. Lucinda Piles is a 45-year resident of Kahala. She served several years on the Waialae Kahala Neighborhood Board and the Kahala Community Association Board. She was actively involved with efforts to prevent landowners from purposefully planting or not maintaining vegetation that encroached onto public beaches and restricts public access. Anne Marie Kirk is a community activist advocating for beach access rights. She's a member of the nonprofit Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, whose mission is to uphold the integrity of the East Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan. And Donna Leong is the Corporation Counsel for the City and County of Honolulu, where she served since 2013. The Corporation Counsel is the chief legal advisor and legal representative of all city agencies, officers, and employees, including the mayor and the city council. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate you being here tonight. Anne Marie, I want to start with you because you've been on this issue for quite some time.
Right.
Tell us how you've seen the access fight evolve over the years.
Well, I've seen more and more people through the issue that we have in East Oahu starting to get connected through social media and realizing this is happening throughout the state. It's not just Oahu. Every island is affected by this. And I just want to clear up something that was said in the beginning about this. It's a mythology to me of community members trashing and being disrespectful and all. This is said a lot against community. And in many cases, when we actually do the investigation, that's really not what's happening. But for me personally, I went down to a beach that I love, and I was told to get out of there. I had been using the accessway for 30 years, and the next thing I know, a gate went up. And I realized it wasn't just a gate in my neighborhood, it was a gate throughout our islands, because I started hearing from other people. And I've seen people grow in their education of understanding what public rights of way are. I've seen people grow in how they communicate to the city and through lawyers and different people. And I think we're at a point now where we need some clear action taken. We need our access to the ocean. That's what makes Hawaii special. We're island people, we're ocean people. And we need to get access to it, fair and reasonable access, and we don't have that yet.
David, tell us, you've fought for this on many occasions. How have you seen it from a legal standpoint change over the years?
I don't know if I've seen it change legally. I think you have different periods where people in government take a serious stand on behalf of the public, and other times when they're lackadaisical, either for political reasons or resource reasons or what have you. So it's a question of implementation, it's a question of will, more than the law, I would say.
Lucinda, I know that your fight has been an interesting one because you're looking at vegetation, and that's something that a lot of us don't necessarily think about. We think about those access paths that Anne Marie's talking about, but there's another issue here where a homeowner can perhaps restrict access in another way.
Well, there's access perpendicular to the beach, but then there's what's called lateral access, which is along the beach. And I think in the last few decades, the practice of planting naupaka, in particular, along beachfront property has increased significantly, and people water, fertilize the lawn, the naupaka, and what naupaka does is it migrates. And unlike a lot of other plants, it keeps moving seaward because that's kind of where the drainage downhill is. And we thought, 10, 15 years ago that we were losing Kahala Beach, that it was eroding. And then through a series of pictures, we realized that actually the beach had previously gone all the way up to the palm trees. And now the naupaka was 20, 25 feet out onto the beach. So that it basically had migrated into what was the public's area. And in many places you couldn't pass any longer except at very low tides. So it kind of began an effort to see what could be done. It turned out that the state, it's under the state's jurisdiction, had policies against it, but no mechanism to do anything about it. So it was really kind of a 10-year process to get legislation that enacted a law that now the DLNR can cite and fine. And so you need to maintain your vegetation above the high water line, which allows then that lateral access. And it's made a huge difference on Kahala Beach, huge difference.
Donna, I think a lot of folks might be confused as to whose job it is to do this enforcement. She's talking about the DLNR, but the city and state, whose job is it really to maintain the public's right of access to the beaches?
Well, as Lucinda was saying, there are two different types of access. One is lateral along the beach up to the high water mark or shoreline, and that's the jurisdiction of the DLNR, State Department of Land and Natural Resources. As far as the access to the beach over fast land to the shoreline, it's a joint effort by DLNR and by the city in terms of through regulation, because that's primarily the regulatory framework is through regulation. Undeveloped land, if you're going to subdivide it, you need to provide public access to the beach, and that's actually where I got my introduction to access to the beach when I was a baby attorney representing resort developers. It went without saying that you provided lateral access along the beach and then public access to the shoreline. And there are a lot of projects in which there was a public access created, a lot next to county parks. So it's a joint effort.
One of the things that makes Hawaii so special and so unique is that the beaches are all public, and we want to get to that and what sort of set that in motion. The law that declared all beaches in Hawaii to be public was groundbreaking and one of the most significant rulings in our state's history. We've got a clip now from Long Story Short in January of 2009 when our Leslie Wilcox interviewed former Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, the late William S. Richardson. Take a look.
Your court was known as an activist court. You helped expand Native Hawaiian rights. What are some of the things you are most proud of?
Well, I think I had a chance well, let me start this way. The previous Chief Justice was the first, and he had been ill for a long time. And so some of the big decisions that did not depend on rulings of the U.S. Supreme Court were being held back. So some of the cases may be 10 years old and just weren't taken up because of his illness, and maybe because of the newness of the state. That some of the cases that were the really important ones were being set aside, perhaps because the U.S. Supreme Court had been coming out with a lot of the criminal cases. So in those cases, Hawaii merely followed suit. If the U.S. Supreme Court ruled a certain way, then we had to go along, of course. But then there were other cases peculiar of Hawaii. Water, beaches, plantation differences, general growth of Hawaii that might be unique of Hawaii.
You could have used the English law as a precedent, but often you would look back to see what Ali'i from the monarchy days did.
Well, whenever I could, whatever the history books would come up with on old Hawaii, and what few things that I had picked up over the years, I felt that I should try to apply those to the extent that we could.
For example, when the question came, well, who owns the new land being created by lava from the volcano, what was the answer of your court?
Well, that seemed easy enough for me, but I know the beaches were needed in Hawaii. Without our beaches, there was no Hawaii to speak of, the Hawaii that we loved.
Now,
So-
in many parts of the continent, the beaches are private property, right?
Yes, and it seemed perfectly logical to me that people should be able to use the beaches, and that the property lines could not follow all of the methods of Old England, say, and that I should try to bring those cases up in line to the way the Hawaiians did it.
It's a monumental decision that affects us every day.
It does, and I go swimming too, and I know I can go out to a certain spot, and this is public property, and my friends and I can use it.
Wonderful to hear that wisdom tonight. You know, when you think about it, of course, the beaches are public, but we are talking about the access. Donna, tell us, what is the law?
Well, since 1973, the state law requires people who are subdividing their property along the shoreline to provide public access to the shoreline. And it required the county prior to 1974 to adopt ordinances to implement that law. In Honolulu, we have adopted the ordinance, and it requires that subdivisions along the shoreline provide public access to the shoreline, as well as multifamily developments, which are developments with 6 or more dwelling or lodging units. So that's how, in new developments, the access to the shoreline is guaranteed. For older subdivisions prior to 1973, though, that statute was not in effect. And that's where I think you have a lot of conflict today, and that's in the older, mostly residential subdivisions.
And I see you're nodding your head there. Lots of conflict today. Tell us about that.
Well, it's what you're talking about in these older areas, that there's homes and then there's pathways that people have used for many years. And all of a sudden, a new homeowner comes in and builds over, puts a gate up. I was on Maui in Ku'au, staying at a friend's house, and they were one house away from the beach. And I said, hey, can't we go to the beach right there? And she said, you know, my family, for over 3 to 4 generations, we could walk straight to the beach, but a new homeowner came in and blocked our access. And what happens to community is community doesn't know the rules. They don't know who to contact. They don't know who to call, city or state, and they get lost. And what happens is slowly these places that have been traditionally used are cut off. And I walked with fishermen in Kailua who said we used all these access ways, and now they're all gone. And that makes me really sad. You know, it makes, what is our future going to be? And also the public right-of-ways, the really important thing too about them is it allows us access to the beach, and it doesn't allow others to privatize the beach. Their backyard is not the beach, it's for the public, but we can't get there. So I think that's what we are seeing, those conflicts in those areas.
Mm-hmm. David, what have you seen when we think about having that access? When a homeowner, you know, on their side, they would argue, hey, this is my property, I paid for it, I can put up that fence. What is the argument against that?
Well, sometimes they can't put up the fence because the public has a right of access. And those are based on various theories, which are, I'm not going to bore your viewers trying to explain them, but there are various theories that allow the public access to a beach, but it's very fact specific, depends on the location, depends on the history, et cetera. And there continues to be problems with the permitting process, which also is supposed to ensure access. You know, subdivisions of, I think, less than 4 lots don't have to provide that access. The Hokulea development on the Big Island, there was a document that was discovered in the trial that the planner purposely suggested and internally for the developer to locate the public access as far away as possible to make it most inconvenient to the public. These are the kinds of things that happen in the decision-making and permitting process that can frustrate the goal of public access. And then you have the problem with the older subdivisions where they were built, some were built without access, and some where the easements are just intended for local residents. And I mean, the problems compound when you think of parking. Sometimes parking is an issue. So it's multifaceted, and it depends on the location.
I mean, we all want access, I would think. But Lucinda, I wonder how you come at this, because you've been on the neighborhood board. I'm sure you've talked to homeowners who have experienced some of the negative impacts, perhaps more with increasing tourists, more and more impact, people who don't necessarily live there coming through larger groups. What are you hearing from the people who live along those access? What are they saying?
You know, I think it's all about sort of awareness that you're in a residential neighborhood. Respect. You know, we all talk about the need to respect one another. And I think a lot of times they're very regular people who don't live in the neighborhood, but they come maybe every day to walk the beach. Maybe they come every weekend. And actually, you kind of get to know them, and it's kind of a way to expand your sense of community. On the other hand, especially sort of the young people come down at midnight, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. Maybe they go to the beach and drink. They come up and they're very loud. They come out and stand around their cars and slam doors and carry on for another hour. And you know, there's some people who don't pick up after their dogs. There's some of the mopeders who come from Waikiki in packs of 8 and 10, and they race down the lanes and out. There are people who use them for, you know, their loading and unloading of all kinds of equipment. So I think it's a small portion, but if you live there and it's every night, it's every weekend, there is an irritation, and there's also, to some degree, a little bit of vulnerability because there's anybody. But I think the problem, at least in Kahala, I think the lanes that were closed, under Bishop Estate, almost every other house had a beach access. Once it went into fee simple, it's every quarter mile. And I actually thought that was what the state required, was in every quarter mile, because going from Black Point to the Kahala Hotel, they are. But I think other people closed them because of the small percentage that disrupted their quality of life. And I think that was a shame. But I don't know that that's everywhere, but I think that is very real.
Sure, and we want to bring in the audience on that. One of our viewers wrote, calling in tonight, says, can the state do more to control illegal behavior on the beach? This might stop homeowners from trying to limit access. Donna, what's your take on that?
Well, the city does have a lot of public safety enforcement as well as the state. It's all a matter of resources. You only have so much resources at the city and state level, so you can't have the law enforcement officers everywhere all the time. That's really what the problem is. You know, if there were unlimited resources, sure, DoCare, which is, I forget it's the conservation enforcement arm of DLNR, would send more officers out there, right? But they don't have that type of resource.
You know, Anne Marie, at the top of the hour, you were talking about how there's sort of this myth about the bad citizen. How do we balance the homeowner's, right to a quiet experience in their own home with the public access?
I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but to the extent, and I know Lucinda and I know what she's talking about. Again, I think it's a small percentage, but we need to separate enforcement of wrongdoing and public rights of way and access ways. They're two separate things. So the enforcement has to take place, and that's what Donna is talking about. There has to be enforcement. It doesn't mean you close the right of way. The other thing about the right of way, and I just wanted to get back to, I love public rights of way because I can go to Maui or Hawaii Island and I know I can access the beach. You don't have to live in the neighborhood to use a public right of way. You don't have to be from that neighborhood. That's the beauty of public rights of way and accessing our ocean. But again, enforcement and public right of ways are two separate issues. So I do think we need much more enforcement, not on our beaches, but in our ocean areas as well. But I just want to make that clarification. But the other thing that happens is some of the best people to watch your place are your neighbors, are the people that use the beach. We're the ones that are calling and saying, you guys shouldn't be doing this at the beach. We're the ones that are using the beach and respectful of the homeowners. So I don't know if to answer the question.
We've had somewhat of a problem with some of the vacant lots on Kahala Avenue and a sort of an invasion of homeless people. And some of them are doing drugs a little bit, and so the regular beach walkers, the ones that go down the lane, every morning and whatever, they're the ones that call the police and say, this guy came stumbling out of the bushes, and he looks like he's on drugs or whatever. So actually, we have. I think we owe a debt to the people who use the access. Is like you say. They care about the beach. They keep an eye on it. And especially in neighborhoods like Kahala, where we have a lot of absentee owners, it's actually these non-residents that probably take the care of the beach more seriously. But there are those, and like I say, I think it's usually the under 30s crowd.
Well, and that's
but we're not in that group at this table.
Cultivating community is all about, right? That we all watch out for each other, that we all take care of this space together.
We just need somebody down there at night going, shh, they're asleep.
I want to bring you in on this question. Does public beach access differ from island to island or county to county?
So the laws are substantially the same county to county, but the context is different. When you think about Honolulu was urbanized much earlier than a lot of the neighbor islands. And so the context of these disputes is much different. What you'll have often is a large landowner coming and saying, okay, we're going to develop. And so the decision making about access is made publicly. There may be disputes as to the degree to which the county is properly applying the law, but it's all being done after the laws that Donna referred to were adopted in the 70s. And so the context of the neighbor islands is different from Oahu because you have a lot of development on the coastline before 1973. And that's why the way these issues come up are often different. I mean, there's a commonality that access is a problem throughout the state, but the way it's manifested itself is quite different.
What about when you throw in commercial activity, when you have someone, performing a wedding or taking up the beach in that sense? What are the rights there?
If we talk about the beach, the standard is the same throughout the state. And it is I know a few years ago it was a big problem on Maui in particular, but it can manifest itself everywhere. I noticed at Kaimana there's often bride and groom coming to get their photographs, but it doesn't seem to be an issue that affects the public. They're respectful of the people on the beach, and people are respectful of them. There's no issue. They're not occupying the beach in a way to exclude others, at least from what I've seen at Kaimana. At other places on Maui, that was a problem. I don't know if it still is, where commercial wedding ventures would basically try to kick the people off.
Right, and I think that a lot of local folks, you know, you want to be respectful. You don't necessarily want to walk through someone's ceremony. We've all been raised to be polite and to be good, and so we don't want to do that. But you had talked to me earlier that there's also a balance for the community as well on that issue.
Well, yeah, because you're talking about a public resource. It's a community resource, and a commercial business is making money off where the community has a right to be. And a lot of times we find out these businesses don't have permits. And so that's where it becomes very problematic. So a place where if you see a wedding going on, you're right, you're a local person, you're not going to go through the wedding. But if they're in a public beach, should they be there in the first place, occupying a space that's there for the public? You know, so that's where I have an issue with that.
So for example, it's not on the beach, but the Kahala Hilton is having weddings on state land right next to the beach, and they are trying to tell people that they cannot walk through or use that area when there's a wedding. They can't do that. The Kahala Hilton doesn't have the legal authority to do that, but they intimidate and bully people to thinking that that's private property, and that's not right.
And the hard part about that, of course, is that you don't want to be the person photobombing a bride on the big day, right?
Well, you could be if you want to have some fun.
Unless you're David Frankel.
David Frankel's in the background, in the alpaca bushes.
So in that case, if there is an entity like that and you do have a right to be there, what should you do?
Well, it depends on the context. If you want to use the area and they're using it for a commercial purpose, you can stand your ground and say, no, I'm going to use this area. There's no reason why members of the public can't bring their hibachis and have a big picnic right in front of the Kahala Hilton. That's public land. I would make the Kahala Hilton folks upset, but they've been using a public resource at a discount and oftentimes illegally, and they shouldn't be doing that. And they've been doing it to essentially the exclusion of the public. There's no reason why members of the public can't picnic there, but the Hilton has tried to intimidate folks from exercising their rights.
Lucinda, what's your take on that? I mean, there is this feeling that some areas you don't necessarily want to disrupt folks who are using it, who might be there before you in a sense.
Well, I this afternoon decided to walk down and see. It was high tide at 3 o'clock. It wasn't a super high tide, only about a 2-foot tide, but just kind of to see what it looked like and if there were weddings. And I encountered 3 groups of bride and groom that were being photographed, but they were in front of the Kahala Beach apartments and down that way. So I'm assuming they were having their photo shoots, but were from the hotel. But what I did note is the line of beach chairs, the front row, was actually the high water was lapping up underneath. And there was a surprising number of plastic bottles that had washed off of people's lounge chairs or whatever that were in the wash of the waves that, you know, I assume they'll clean up. But what struck me was there was a second row, and then in between was some sand. But several people had turned their chairs and made these cluster groups. So basically, the middle of the beach was barricaded. So you had to go in the water, and not that it was very high, but you still had to go in the water, or you had to go up onto the grass, the walkway by the pool, to traverse the length of the beach. And you know, if we're talking about higher tides, 3-foot tides, it's just a very narrow strip. And if they're talking about another wedding site, that will actually, there's a wedding site on either side of the property, but then the groins that come out, what they're proposing in the easement is to include those groins, even the island, for their use at another wedding site, which means that the public, the only way they can go down the beach would be to have to go right between those 2 wedding sites. So even be more difficult to pass.
You know, at some point, I think then folks just say, you know what, I don't even want to bother.
Yeah.
What do you think that does to community?
Oh, that's the worst thing to happen, because you start cutting off community from that precious resource, which is the ocean, which is part of our culture for those of us who are Hawaiian and also do cultural practices there. It changes how we live in this world. It's heartbreaking, and it just, I was a little girl and I was told to get off the beach. And as a young teenager, I was told to get off the beach. As a young woman, I was told. And as an older woman now, I was told. And I can't believe that people think that they have the right to do that. And I'm thinking, I'm someone who I'll speak up for myself. But what about that little girl who is 9 years old, like when I was? And will she come back to that beach? Will a little boy come back to that beach? And I think the other thing that happens is, it's really important, is to understand what these areas are. And we're kept, that information is not always with us. So we don't know if it's public or private. So we had a particular homeowner make signs that looked like DLNR signs and put them up and said no trespassing, when actually it was a public right of way. And it wasn't until we took photographs of the different signs that they had put up that they were called out on putting up fake signs. Now, this is one incident, but I'm sure it's happening in other places as well. And Donna, you were going to say something. So.
Well, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I think all of us, especially those of us who were born and raised in Hawaii, are very grateful for the Ashford decision, in which Justice Richardson, CJ, said, the beaches belong to the people. That's such an important case, because if that decision had not been made, all of us could not enjoy the public beaches. So, as you said, Yunji, we're talking about public access to the beaches, and there's no constitutional right for public access to the beach, but there's now strong statutory and ordinance law that says there is a public right for access to the beach. The question is how you balance the public's right to access the beach versus the private right of a private property owner, even if it's a big corporation like Kahala Hilton, to use its or his or her private property. And as you said, the problem is, where do you know? You don't know where the demarcation line is between public property and the public right-of-way. Is it a public right-of-way or is it a private right-of-way? Right? You just don't know. Right. And that's one of the benefits of being an attorney, to be able to know, but you have to have the legal plus the factual knowledge to know it's public or private, because I don't even know where you're talking about, David. I wouldn't know where I can walk and park my stuff. And
right. And you don't want to go to the beach to get into a fight. I mean, all of us are going there to relax and enjoy what makes Hawaii so special. So in that case, if you do encounter a homeowner and they say, hey, get out of here, this is my property, what she's talking about, what should the average person do?
Well, it's difficult to say without knowing if it's a public right-of-way or a private right-of-way. I mean, how do you know, as you said, right? How do you know whether it's public versus private? Although there are maps and there are lists that indicate where certain rights of way are, but perhaps not all of them.
And the problem is, too, is like, as a community member, there's no place for us to go. I mean, my brother and I spent a year calling the city, calling the state. We didn't know what department, talk to this department, talk there. So you have the city and the state not on the same page. And it's confusing for a community. Who do we talk with? And then also, you're talking to people who, when you talk about a public right-of-way, it's not just access to the beach. It's where is that access? Is it to a cliff that someone fishes off of? Is it to a place where you can swim? Every public right-of-way has a different use. 100 yards away can be a completely different use for the ocean. So it's understanding that as well. So if you're talking to Department of Permanent Planning and they give out a permit for someone for a gate, and you go, have you even gone down there and found out how the community uses this beach? And they're not doing that. So there's a real disconnect. And here I am 20 years later talking about an issue where that institutional knowledge was with that person I spoke to 20 years ago. They retired, they're no longer there. So I have to reteach everything. And it's incredibly frustrating. As a community member, I would like to see an overall state commission or task force dealing specifically with public rights of way. So as a community member, where you're on Molokai, you're on Hawaii Island, Kauai, if you have an issue, you can call and you can get an answer from a city and a state person and have people talk to each other, because that's the most frustrating thing, is to continue to say the same things over and over again. This year, the Hokulea came home, 3 weeks ago? And we're celebrating an ocean island community, and there's places in this island where we can't even access the ocean.
We have a community member writing in tonight. In situations where there is no sidewalks, it's not uncommon for homeowners to set rocks at the edge of the road, blocking use of the land between the road and the homeowner's fence. Who should police this issue? Laura from Poipu is writing in tonight. David, can you take this one?
Well, I think a lot of homes, the private property line ends, but there's an area between where their line ends and where the street is. So they don't actually have the right to put up those rocks, what have you. But it's also a question whether there's a county or city ordinance that prevents parking there as well.
Well, we've seen this in Lanikai where, you drive through there and you see large rocks or you see coconut trees planted where it seems like, if you're driving through, well, can I park here? Can I not park here? Does this belong to the state or the homeowner? So how do you navigate something like that?
You can't do it on the spot. You have to know where the private property ends, and which is not an easy thing for anyone to do. But that's ultimately what would have to do. We all know it's fairly common for private property owners to extend their property onto public property through landscaping or putting boulders out or what have you. That's pretty common, but you still need to do the research to figure out where their line actually is.
What about this issue of eminent domain, or the city perhaps, saying, okay, this has been a path that's been used for generations, we're going to take that. Does that happen?
It has in the past. During my tenure, we haven't used the power of eminent domain. It hasn't been authorized by City Council to take any private right-of-way for public access. But I know that historically there have been condemnations of rights-of-way.
And let me add to that. Each county now has, they have different names, but they're coastal land special funds that are paid, that property taxes go into. And one of the purposes of these on each of the islands is to allow for the purchase of coastal land and as well as access. Generally, these commissions try to do it where a landowner is willing, but it doesn't have to be that way. The city and the counties can decide they want to condemn access ways, and they have money now in these funds to do so. So that is something that can and should happen on more often.
And actually last year, the city just completed the purchase of Turtle Bay Makai lands at Kahala Bay, just for that purpose, to preserve the public's access along Kahala Bay, as well as access to Kahala Bay from Kamehameha Highway. So it was with the use of clean water natural land funds.
And we're looking for more of that, Donna.
Yes, I understand that. And we have a new process this year.
We have Hawai'i writing in from Kailua, who says that she's experienced incidents where people have rented a home and then put out chairs and tables on the sand and tell the public to move away from their areas of the beach.
Yeah.
There needs to be some type of public education effort to make people aware of how and why Hawaii is different. We have between 8 and 9 million, depending on how many people you're counting, coming to our state every year, visitors who we welcome, of course. Tourism is our #1 industry. We need the visitors to come to our state to keep this economic engine running. But how do we balance, all those people coming who might not be familiar with the fact that we don't have private beaches here? Lucinda, what do you think?
Well, I think we need to get Hawaiian Airlines to add it to their little welcome video. They seem to tell people everywhere, to go. But I think that is a good point, but in all seriousness, I think that doing something like that, working with the airlines or the Hawaii Visitors Bureau or something that gets that message out there, and maybe it's part of what makes Hawaii special, is to say, that we love our beaches are for everyone, and but that's, that sort of message, I'm not quite sure how you would.
Anne Marie, who do you think are the biggest obstructionists on this issue? Is it local homeowners who are restricting access? Is it visitors? Is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. The areas that I've been asked to help in are areas of local homeowners, and I want to say I'm grateful for people like Lucinda. There's many homeowners on the beach that are like Lucinda, that they have aloha for everyone, and I'm talking about a small group of people that we seem to be doing these kind of things to community. It's incredibly frustrating because, again, we go through the process. We call the city, we call the state, and we're waiting for change to happen. It does happen, and it's part of educating that local homeowner to know the rules and to understand. And most of the time, we've been successful in that. But it's a process of teaching community, teaching the homeowner, and also teaching the neighborhood board, and actually teaching our elected officials. The other thing, sometimes we worked with elected officials who are not ocean people, who don't understand, so you got to go through the whole kind of why it's so important. But I think that, yeah, that's kind of surprising to me. It's local homeowners.
Well, on that very issue, Ross from Honolulu writing in saying that he thinks the small beaches should not have public access, only the larger beaches should have public access. David, what's your take on that?
I don't understand. I mean, there is a legitimate issue with regard to protecting resources. You don't want to overrun resources. And I think this is a particular issue on the neighbor islands where there are some great beaches where there's cultural sites, maybe petroglyphs, and you don't want it to be a zoo. Pahui Bay on the Big Island is an example where access is incredibly difficult now. On the other hand, you don't want unlimited access because the resources there are just so fabulous. So on Oahu, I don't see that as an issue. I don't know what little beach he's referring to that he doesn't want the public to be a, so yeah, I don't know.
How does the general public know, and this is what you were talking about, if access is public or private? Where do we go to find out? Is there an office to contact or a website? Donna, where can the public go if they have a question about this?
I tried to search for that, and I know SOEST, which is a Sea Grant program for University of Hawaii, it has a website that has a map. So this has been a very educational process. It has a map with the public access points on it, but I was looking at it via my phone, so I'm not sure how accurate it is and the basis for it. So there's that. And then my long-term deputy provided a list of access points that the Department of Parks and Recreation had as of 1997, but it's like very few of them, so I think more have been added, so it's not been updated. One of Mayor Caldwell's big initiatives is to move towards a technological-based city, and we have just a crackerjack information technology department that is trying to create databases electronically that make a lot of information, geographic information system databases accessible to the public. So, as we're talking about where do you go, state, city, I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing that DIT would suck all the data from the state and the city. I
think we can all
put it on a database.
We could use a master map on this.
I think Sea Grant has a good map to start off. And the other thing, just to know it's a public right-of-way, it's very simple. There's a blue sign that says public right-of-way. And beneath that sign is another important element of a public right-of-way. It's an emergency contact number. So if you're on another island, wherever you are, and you see an emergency happens, you can look at that sign, and you don't have to say what street you're on. You can say, I'm at Accessway 127, and the emergency people know exactly where you are. That's another extremely important element of public rights-of-way, is that emergency sign. And that's why in areas where people are fighting for public rights-of-way, is we know that sign is part of that process, and it's incredibly important. Very simple. You see a blue sign that says public right-of-way, it's a public right-of-way. But I will say there are places that they've been taken down. And that's unfortunate as well. So we have to get those signs.
Well, I think at least the ones in Kahala not only say it's a public right-of-way, but they also say what's allowed and what's not allowed and so forth on it. And we find that when they put them up, they get defaced very quickly. They get stickers put on them, they get graffiti put on them, and pretty soon it would be hard to even see it. Well, we had one that the neighborhood board requested a couple go up a few years ago, and probably within 6 months they were so badly covered with that they were not legible. So it's interesting. It's a challenge.
Please.
So the blue signs are on Oahu. I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't know the neighbor islands. Thank you for that.
I don't think they have them there. Different counties do different things. I think one of the best resources, besides Sea Grant, which has that good thing, is each county planning department has a coastal zone management program, and they base most of the counties either can give you a list of where all the public access ways or tell you who does have that list. What the information the counties can provide is not the universe of accesses, because some of the access ways go through land that is managed by the Department of Land and Natural Resources. But the best and first place to start is with the Department of Planning for the various counties.
When you're talking about the neighbor islands, you know, on the Big Island where I'm from, this is a question that I have as well. That Don from Waikele is writing in, though. Do golf courses that are near the beach have to have public access? Because, of course, we have some of our shorelines that are lined with golf courses.
So when a golf course is being proposed to be built, oftentimes that would be made a condition of that. But existing golf courses, there is not that requirement. The exception to that could be Native Hawaiians exercising traditional customary practices may be able to cross the golf course to access the shoreline. So that's anyway.
That's interesting. Larry's writing in saying, I'm a surfer and love access to the beaches, but many do abuse the beach access. It's not all let's take care of the Aina. They park in people's yards, they trash and steal stuff. The residents should have some rights, but they don't always get support from police. That's Larry's take. I mean, do you hear that from your neighborhood, neighbors, especially having served on the board there?
I think we're lucky that it doesn't sound like it's quite as bad. I don't know of any parking in anybody's yard. As I said, you know, they will use the access lane for loading and unloading, and then they'll go back out on the street and park. So that sounds like that's a bit more severe than we experience, or I'm aware of we experience in Kahala, thank goodness. Like I said, the majority of the people are friendly, nice kids, you know. It's more the nighttime crowd. And to some degree, it's the visitor. I think the moped thing is you know, again, you talk about the education, about setting out your chairs on the beach and telling people, you know, for 8 or 10 mopeders to turn down a private lane that says it's a pedestrian access, it's obviously a private lane, and haul out onto the beach and then spin around and come back. Yeah, and I don't think I just think it's an awareness in how do you make people aware of the things that you value, and maybe they just don't get it. And it's always a challenge.
Excuse me. If I could address that just a little bit, you know, I think it really depends on the facts of the case. As David said, it's hard to imagine someone parking on your private property. Then what do? You call the police and say, this is my private property, I want you to take the car away, yet you're going to have to show the police officer a lot of different things in order for the officer to take action. Now, if it were a moving violation, HPD would definitely take action. I mean, they tell us that time and again. You know that, there's no waiver of the law. They're going to enforce it. But there's a lot of discretion in the police about citing, warning, citing, or arresting. That's a difficult situation, parking a car on private property. I would imagine that there are quite a few things that would have to be proven, and I think that might be why, I'm just guessing because it depends on the facts, that perhaps there was no citation.
And talking about solutions, this caller writing in, should the Board of Realtors inform and educate potential beachfront home buyers about the public's right of access? Could they require buyers to sign an acknowledgement form? What do you think about that?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think the more that all the different ways we can educate homeowners, we can educate community, everything is going to that positive solution. Any way we can educate, I think is good, and I think that's a really good suggestion. And I think the vacation rentals should also have that. If they should have that as well, part of their license, that to get your license, you have to inform those who come that you can't take over public beach areas.
I think one issue that we have, partly with vacant lots, partly with non-resident vacation rentals, that people aren't always there. If somebody is breaking the law or whatever they're doing, if the property owner isn't there to file the complaint, the police can't do anything. So you can have somebody camping, you can have somebody's car on, and if the property owner isn't present, unless you can get some written power of attorney from the property owner, and we've had that before. We also have the issue again between city and state. Part of Kahala Beach, certain sections of it, there's been quite a bit of accretion in the last 20, 30 years. So the property ends here, the high water is here, and this 20 or 30 feet is kind of no man's land because the property owner doesn't have jurisdiction, but the state doesn't really want to be bothered with it. So the police come out, and the property owner says, "No, I don't. I only own here." And so you've got somebody camping in the middle, or you've got somebody who's lit a fire or doing whatever, bathing nude or something. So that jurisdiction issue is.
Well, if there's someone bathing nude, I hope someone does call. So I hope that does happen. Well, can I just say something? What you were talking about the wash line, and I think this is a way to educate community to understand what's public. It's the highest wave at the highest tide. So in the summertime, say the wave goes to the end of the table. In the winter, it only comes here. This is public because it goes by the highest wash. And I think a lot of community doesn't understand that. So, and it's not a storm wave. It has to be just that highest tide with the highest wave wash on that line. So, and I've talked to many community members who didn't know that. And I think it's really good for them to know. So they know that they're in a public space, even in the wintertime when the ocean's over here, that they have a right to be there as well.
So let's say I'm walking down the beach and I experience what you're talking about, where someone says, "Get out of here, not your beach." What is the first thing that I should do?
The first thing is to say, actually, it's not, because this is public and this is where the high tide mark is, and I hope that you educate yourself on these issues. And have a good day. Aloha. Is that good, Donna? Yeah, thanks.
David, from a legal standpoint, is there something else
Community.
you should do? Should you document the incident in some way? Is there a public agency of some kind you should call, or a...
I think ignoring those kinds of comments from people is the best medicine. But yeah, documenting is great. I mean, if you ignore it, there's not really any legal recourse because they haven't harmed you, but that is really what you should just ignore it, because they're not going to do anything about it anyway. What if they're going to call the cops? Then let them call the cops, and you should, hey, I'm in public land.
Actually, that's what I've been confronted like that. I mean, really confronted, being yelled at. And I just continue on, because this is the thing. This is why we need the city and state to take action and do what's right for community, because what you do, if action's not taken, it pits community members against each other, and that's not fair. That's not fair to the community. That's not fair to the homeowner. That's not fair to the community person. So this hostile environment takes place when it's actually the city and state need to clarify the rules and let everyone know and educate. And I think that to me is a problem.
Anonymous from Kailua saying, Kailua resident is unhappy with the amount of people parking 3 to 5 blocks into residential neighborhoods just to gain public access to their beaches. These visitors should stay in Waikiki. This idea, I mean, that's what we're really talking about, this idea that it is their beach. It's not their beach.
It's not their beach.
Why is that important to know?
Because once you realize it's not your beach, that you have kuleana not only to where you live, but throughout the islands, and you have kuleana to your neighbor and your community member and our visitor who comes to the island. They have a right to come to our beaches. That's what they're here for. It's, I've heard that before, this is my beach, and I thought, it's not your beach. It's everyone's beach. And we have to continue to say that and call people on it when they say something like that. And that goes, words start privatizing our beaches. My beach, this is ours. It's everybody's. It's everybody's. We have to watch the language that we use, and that helps educate people. So I call people on it. Sometimes I kind of go, oh, my beach over there. I'm like, wait a minute, it's not my beach, it's everyone's beach. So we've got to continue to use language that's inclusive and not exclusive.
On the other hand, we do have too many visitors to this state that's causing problems for our resources, whether it's sewage, traffic, water, or beach overcrowding. Our beaches are a finite resource, and they're decreasing with sea level rise. We can't accommodate more. We can't even accommodate really the number of tourists we're getting now. It's excessive, and the experience that people had decades ago has been lost, where going to the beach was one where you had huge swaths of space, natural beauty, and now you have the urban experience at the beach, which is a loss. And it's going to get worse as more and more tourists come here.
But what do we do?
I mean, you can understand this resident who lives in Kailua who says, gosh, I wish the tourists would stay in Waikiki. They can concentrate there, and I could still enjoy this stretch of sand.
Yep.
Donna, we're going to let you have the last word tonight. How soon can we expect that map to be up and running?
Well, let's see. They just got the mainframe for the Department of Motor Vehicles back up, so that's a big thumbs up. We'll give them this week off. No, seriously. I mean, it's one of those things that I can take back to the Department of Information Technology because they have a ton of projects, as you might imagine. Just in the 4 years that I've been with the mayor's administration, we really have been trying to move, at least I've been trying to move my personal department, my department, from paper-based to electronic-based. So hopefully it'll be in the queue.
Okay, we're going to follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight. And of course, we thank our guests, Attorney at Law David Kimo Frankel, Anne Marie Kirk, member of Livable Hawaii Kaihui, Lucinda Piles, Beach Access Advocate, and Donna Leong, Chief Counsel for the City and County of Honolulu. Next week on Insights, most Hawaii residents know the story behind the Micronesian migration. 70 years ago, 2 nuclear bombs were dropped on Bikini Atoll, setting off 12 years of detonation in the Marshall Islands. Years later, when referring to the displacement of Micronesians, a former senior member of then President Nixon's cabinet is reported to have said, quote, "There are only 90,000 of them out there. Who gives a damn?" Today, nearly 25,000 Micronesians live in Hawaii. That's about 2% of our population. Despite what some may think, they are not living off the public dole. They pay taxes, struggle with employment, health, housing, and most of all, assimilation. Today, the Marshall Islands face a new environmental tragedy. Has the migration of Micronesians only just begun? That's next week, right here. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights. Until next time, a hui ho.